It's easy to forget how much the world is shaped by unseen hands. The people who sit in the shadows, quietly witnessing history unfold, never celebrated, never even acknowledged, but forever changed by what they know.
Go to the victims of the genocide.
In the mid-1990s, the world turned its gaze toward Rwanda, but not soon enough. What began as an ordinary year, a year like any other, would soon unravel into one of the bloodiest genocides in modern history, a massacre that claimed over 1 million lives. But there's something even more tragic about the story of Rwanda, something that most of us don't know. One man saw it coming and tried to stop it. His name was Michael Aurigan, a man you've likely never heard of. He was a United Nations investigator, working quietly behind the scenes, tasked with looking into atrocities committed during the Rwandan Civil War. What he uncovered, though, was far more sinister than anyone had imagined. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't even a journalist. He was a low-ranking UN employee, just doing his job. But what he uncovered threatened to expose not just the violence of a country in turmoil, but the very system that stood by and allowed it to happen. Aurigan's investigation led him to a truth the United Nations and the world was unwilling to face. He discovered that the genocide wasn't just a series of random events. It was planned. It was orchestrated. And some of the people responsible were sitting in offices far removed from the bloodshed, high-ranking members of the international community who knew, who watched, and who did nothing. As Aurigan dug deeper, he discovered something even more chilling. His findings were buried, ignored, silenced. The UN didn't want to acknowledge the truth, because acknowledging the truth meant facing its own role in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent people. This wasn't just a failure of a nation. This was a failure of the international community to act. And Aurigan, a simple man with a sense of justice and moral clarity, had become the whistleblower nobody wanted. Because the truth he was about to tell wasn't just dangerous, it was inconvenient. What do we do when we face a truth that makes us uncomfortable? Do we turn away? Do we pretend it isn't happening? Do we shield ourselves with silence? The story of Rwanda isn't just a story of brutality. It's a story of how the world failed, how the United Nations, in particular, failed to protect its most vulnerable members, and how one man stood alone, a voice in the wilderness, trying to make them hear. Aurigan's report was devastating. It laid bare the involvement of key political figures in the violence. It implicated diplomats, government officials, and even peacekeepers who stood by as the bloodshed escalated. But when it came time for the UN to act on his findings, it did something far more sinister. It buried them. And so the UN did what it does best when confronted with uncomfortable truths. It ignored him. Michael Aurigan was silenced. His reports were locked away. His career ruined. He was labeled a troublemaker, a whistleblower who, in the eyes of the UN, had overstepped. They would call it bureaucratic politics, but in reality, it was something far darker. A complicity that allowed the genocide to unfold without consequence. What do you do when the very institution you believe in, the institution designed to protect the weak and vulnerable, turns its back on you? Rwanda, to this day, is a country defined by what it survived, what Aurigan witnessed, what he tried so desperately to expose. It was all part of a larger, hidden story. A story of power, politics, and the systemic failure that allowed a genocide to take place. And in the years since, There have been attempts to rewrite the history of Rwanda to tell a more convenient version of events, one where the international community acted swiftly and decisively, where the UN was seen as a force of peace, not a bystander. But the truth remains, and Michael Aragon's voice, though drowned out in the official narrative, still echoes in the corridors of the UN, in the hearts of those who know what was allowed to happen in the name of peace. Michael Aragon never set out to be a hero. He never sought fame or glory. He was simply doing his job, and when that job revealed the darkest corners of human behavior, he could not ignore it. His story is one of quiet resistance, of standing alone in a world that turned a blind eye and shouting the truth even when that truth was uncomfortable, even when it cost him everything. It's easy to forget the faces behind the headlines, to ignore the quiet figures who stood up when the world looked away. But the story of Michael Aragon is a reminder that history is never just shaped by the powerful, by the loud voices. Sometimes it's shaped by the whispers of those who refuse to let the truth be buried. And when we look back on Rwanda, when we think of the millions who suffered, we must remember that there were some who tried to stop it, even if the world didn't listen. The spy who saved Rwanda was a man who never thought of himself as a hero. But in the end, isn't that the truest kind of heroism? The truth can be silenced, but it will never disappear.